The last Vorthan battleship exploded in silent fury against the star-speckled void, its death throes painting the darkness with brilliant orange flames that would burn for mere seconds before the vacuum claimed them. Commander Sarachan watched from the bridge of the human dreadnought Defiance as debris scattered like cosmic confetti, marking the end of a war that had consumed 3 generations of humanity. "All enemy vessels destroyed, Commander," reported Lieutenant Torres, his voice carrying the weight of exhaustion that had settled into every human soul over the past 70 years. "The Vorthan Empire has been eliminated." Sarah nodded slowly, unable to feel the triumph that should have accompanied such words. Around her, the bridge crew maintained their stations with mechanical precision, their faces reflecting the same hollow emptiness that victory had brought. They had won, yes, but at a cost that made the word victory taste like ash in her mouth. The Vorthans had been humanity's first contact with alien life, and they had come not with open hands but with planet-killer weapons. Earth cities had burned in the opening hours of their invasion, reducing a population of 8 billion to barely 2 billion survivors who fled to the outer colonies. What followed was 7 decades of the most brutal warfare the galaxy had ever witnessed. Humanity had been forced to become something else entirely. The gentle species that had once debated the ethics of genetic modification and artificial intelligence had embraced every dark technology they could devise. They had built ships that could crack planets, engineered diseases that targeted specific alien genetic markers, and created artificial intelligences whose sole purpose was to calculate the most efficient methods of extinction. The bridge's main view screen displayed the tactical overview of the Kepler 442 system, the final Vorthan stronghold. Where once a thriving civilization of 12 billion Vorthans had built magnificent crystal cities that caught and refracted their sun's light into rainbow cascades, now only cooling slag remained. Humanity had been thorough in their final solution. "Commander," Torres continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "we're receiving surrender broadcasts from the remaining Vorthan civilian populations in the Outer Rim. They're asking for mercy." Sarah closed her eyes. Mercy. It was a concept that felt as foreign to her now as the Vorthan language had 7 decades ago. She had been born during the 3rd year of the war, had never known a time when humanity wasn't fighting for its very survival. Every decision, every strategy, every weapon they had developed had been born from the simple principle that it was better to be the last species standing than to be extinct. "Signal the fleet," she said finally. "Begin the final protocols. No survivors." The words left her lips with the same ease that she might order coffee, and that realization should have horrified her. Instead, she felt only the cold satisfaction of a task nearing completion. The Vorthans had started this war with genocide. They would end it the same way. As her fleet moved to execute the final phase of what military historians would later call the human solution, Sarah reflected on what they had become. They had started as explorers, dreamers who looked to the stars with hope and wonder. The Vorthans had burned that out of them, forcing humanity to become the most efficient killers the galaxy had ever produced. Their technology had advanced by centuries in mere decades. Human weapons could now unmake matter at the quantum level. Human ships moved faster than anything the Vorthans had ever conceived. Human minds, enhanced by neural implants and combat drugs, could process battlefield information at superhuman speeds. They had become apex predators in a universe that had tried to prey upon them. The last of the Vorthan signals went silent as the human fleet completed its work. 12 billion voices were stilled forever, joining the countless billions who had died in this war. Sarah felt no remorse. Remorse was a luxury that prey species could afford. Humanity had moved beyond such weaknesses. "All objectives complete, Commander," Torres reported. "The Vorthan species is extinct." Sarah turned to face her crew, seeing her own transformation reflected in their cold, efficient faces. They had won the war, but in doing so, they had become something that their ancestors might not have recognized as human. "Signal Earth Command," she ordered. "The war is over. We are the victors." As the message raced toward humanity's home system at faster-than-light speeds, Sarah wondered what they would do with peace. For 70 years, every human effort had been focused on survival and victory. Now, with no enemies left to fight, what would humanity become? She would soon discover that the universe had been listening to their war cries, and something ancient had taken notice of what humanity had accomplished. 3 months after the last Vorthan world fell silent, the signals began. Dr. Elena Vasquez was working late in her laboratory aboard Luna Station, analyzing quantum resonance patterns from the recent battles when the first transmission arrived. It came not through conventional channels, but directly into the quantum substrate that underlied all matter, a method of communication that should have been impossible. The message was simple, elegant, and terrifying in its implications. We have been waiting for you to finish your first lesson. Elena's hands trembled as she ran the signal through every analysis protocol humanity possessed. The transmission hadn't originated from any known point in space. Instead, it seemed to emerge from the quantum foam itself, as if the universe was speaking. Within hours, similar messages were being received at every human installation throughout the galaxy. Each transmission was identical in content, but uniquely encoded to the quantum signature of its recipient, demonstrating a level of technological sophistication that made humanity's greatest achievements look like stone tools. Admiral Marcus Webb, the newly appointed Supreme Commander of Human Forces, convened an emergency session in the war room of Earth's orbital defense platform. The assembled leaders represented the hardest, most pragmatic individuals humanity had produced, people who had spent decades making the impossible decisions necessary for survival. Xenobiology reports that the transmission method is beyond our current understanding, reported Dr. Vasquez, her image flickering on the holographic display as she spoke from Luna Station. The quantum encoding suggests a civilization that has mastered the fundamental forces of reality itself. Admiral Webb's scarred face remained impassive. At 73, he had commanded the human fleet for the last 30 years of the war, making decisions that had saved humanity while damning his own soul. Threat assessment? Unknown, replied General Harrison, the head of human intelligence. We can't detect their location, their numbers, or their capabilities. They could have a single ship or a million worlds. They could be monitoring us from light years away or from the next room. The implications hung heavy in the air. Humanity had just finished a war that had consumed everything they were, transforming them into a species of efficient killers. They had developed weapons that could crack planets and minds that could calculate genocide with mathematical precision. Yet they were now faced with entities that viewed their greatest achievement, the complete eradication of an alien species, as merely a lesson. Sir, interrupted Lieutenant Commander Phillips, monitoring communications, we're receiving a follow-up transmission. The quantum substrate hummed with new information, and, across every human installation, the same message appeared simultaneously. Congratulations on completing your trials. The galaxy has need of your particular talents. We will arrive to collect you soon. Admiral Webb felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature controls. During the war, humanity had been forced to consider the possibility that other alien species existed beyond the Vorthans. They had prepared for that eventuality by developing increasingly advanced weapons and strategies. But they had never considered the possibility that their war itself might have been observed and evaluated. Analysis indicates that these entities, whoever they are, have been watching our conflict with the Vorthans, Dr. Vasquez continued. The term trials suggests that our war was some form of test. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Had the last 70 years of suffering and transformation been orchestrated? Had humanity's evolution from explorers to exterminators been guided by unseen hands? General Harrison cleared his throat. If that's true, then we need to consider what kind of entities would design such a test, and what they want with the results. Admiral Webb had spent 3 decades studying alien psychology, learning to think like the enemy in order to defeat them. The Vorthins had been predators, driven by a simple desire to expand and consume. These new entities were something else entirely. Gardeners, perhaps, who cultivated specific traits in species across the galaxy. "Sir," Phillips reported again, "there's more. The signal it's beautiful." That last word seemed out of place in the sterile war room, spoken by an officer who had spent his career calculating kill ratios and orbital bombardment patterns. But as the quantum harmonics of the transmission were translated into audible frequencies, even the hardened military leaders could hear it, a sound like cosmic wind chimes, like the music of the spheres themselves. It's not just a message, Dr. Vasquez realized. It's art. These entities are communicating through quantum poetry. The beauty of the signal contrasted sharply with its ominous content. Humanity had become masters of death, their art consisting mainly of increasingly efficient methods of destruction. These entities created beauty even in their most casual communications, suggesting a level of advancement that rendered human achievements insignificant. "Recommendations?" Admiral Webb asked, though he suspected the answer would be unpalatable. "We prepare for contact," General Harrison replied grimly. "We assume hostile intent until proven otherwise, and we ready every weapon at our disposal." Dr. Vasquez shook her head. "Sir, with respect, if these entities wanted us dead, we would be. They're demonstrating capabilities that dwarf our own. I recommend we try to understand what they want before we start shooting." "Understanding is a luxury we can't afford," Webb replied. "Humanity's survival has depended on our willingness to strike first and ask questions later. I won't abandon that principle now." As the meeting continued, none of the assembled leaders could shake the feeling that they were no longer the apex predators they had believed themselves to be. Something ancient and powerful had been watching humanity's transformation, and now it was coming to claim the results of its experiment. The next transmission would arrive in exactly 72 hours, and with it would come visitors from the deep cosmos who would reveal truths about humanity's place in the universe that would shake the very foundations of everything they thought they knew about themselves. They arrived exactly 72 hours later, not in ships, but as reality itself seemed to fold and accommodate their presence. Commander Sarah Chun was aboard the Defiance, now stationed at the edge of the Sol system as part of humanity's hastily assembled defensive perimeter, when space simply changed. There was no dramatic flash of light or thunderous emergence from hyperspace. One moment, the cosmos was empty save for the distant stars. The next, structures that defied comprehension hung in the void like architectural impossibilities. "Sensors are having difficulty processing what they're seeing," reported Lieutenant Torres, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "The objects appear to exist in more dimensions than our instruments can measure." Sarah stared at the main view screen, her enhanced mind struggling to process what she was witnessing. The Ancient One's vessels, if they could be called vessels, looked like crystalline fractals that extended into spatial dimensions that human perception couldn't properly grasp. They hurt to look at, creating optical illusions that made her eyes water and her neural implants spark with warning signals. Across the human fleet, similar reports flooded the communication channels. Every ship's crew was experiencing the same disorienting effect, as if their brains were trying to process colors that didn't exist or sounds that had no frequency. "Admiral Webb, to all vessels," came the Supreme Commander's voice over the fleet channel. "Maintain defensive positions. Do not engage unless fired upon. We're dealing with technology that appears to operate on principles we don't understand." But even as Webb spoke those words, everyone aboard the human ships knew that their weapons would be useless. The Advanced One structures weren't simply more sophisticated than human technology. They operated according to entirely different laws of physics. Then, the communication came, not through radio waves or quantum channels, but directly into the minds of every human being in the solar system simultaneously. "Greetings, young warriors," Asterisk, the voice resonated inside Sarah's skull with the weight of eons, carrying with it a sense of age that made human civilization seem like a brief flicker. But more disturbing was what came with the voice: images, memories, and knowledge that wasn't her own. She saw the galaxy as it had existed millions of years ago, when the Ancient Ones had been young themselves. She witnessed their own transformation from peaceful explorers into something harder, more pragmatic, as they encountered the realities of cosmic survival. She saw other species across the millennia, each tested in their own way, each shaped by carefully orchestrated trials. You have completed your initial evaluation successfully. The extinction of the Vorthan species demonstrated your capacity for necessary action. Asterisk, Admiral Webb's voice crackled over the communication system, fighting to maintain authority in a situation that had spiraled beyond any human understanding. This is Admiral Marcus Webb, Supreme Commander of Human Forces. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response came with what might have been amusement, though the emotion felt alien and vast when filtered through an Ancient One's consciousness. We are the gardeners of the galaxy, Admiral Webb. We have been cultivating suitable species for 7 million years. You are our latest success. Asterisk, the images that accompanied those words were staggering in scope. Sarah saw the rise and fall of countless civilizations, each one guided through carefully designed conflicts and challenges. Some species had failed the tests, becoming either too passive to survive or too aggressive to control. Those failures littered the galaxy as dead worlds and empty space. But some had succeeded, joining what the Ancient Ones called the Eternal War, a conflict spanning multiple galaxies against entities that made the Vorthans look like primitive savages. The Devourers approach from beyond the galactic rim. They consume entire realities, leaving nothing but void in their wake. Your species has demonstrated the adaptability and ruthlessness necessary to stand against them. Asterisk, Dr. Vasquez's voice came through on a priority channel, broadcasting to the entire fleet. They're showing us star charts. Massive formations moving through the intergalactic medium. These Devourers, they're real. And they're heading for the Milky Way. Sarah felt her blood turn to ice as the scope of the situation became clear. The 70-year war with the Vorthans hadn't been humanity's graduation from innocence. It had been their entrance exam for a much larger conflict. Every terrible thing they had done, every moral boundary they had crossed, had been preparation for something worse. The Vorthans were selected as your opponents because they represented a manageable threat that would force rapid evolution. Their aggression ensured that your species would develop the necessary hardness to survive what is coming. Asterisk, the revelation hit the human fleet like a physical blow. The Ancient Ones hadn't just watched the war, they had orchestrated it. The Vorthans had been guided to attack Earth, their natural aggression enhanced and directed to serve as humanity's forge. Admiral Webb's voice, when he responded, carried a fury that had been building for 70 years. You manipulated us. You turned us into killers and called it education. You were already killers, Admiral. We simply gave you worthy prey and sufficient motivation to perfect your talents. Asterisk, the Ancient One's response came with memories of humanity's history. Every war, every genocide, every act of violence that had marked their species' development. The images were undeniable. Humans had always possessed the capacity for tremendous violence. The Ancient Ones had simply refined it. The Devourers will reach this galaxy in approximately 50 of your years. You will spend that time preparing. Other species that have passed their trials will train you in weapons and strategies beyond your current understanding. Asterisk, Sarah found herself speaking before she realized it, her voice cutting through the fleet communications. And if we refuse? The answer came with cold finality. Asterisk, then, your species will be consumed along with the rest of the galaxy when the Devourers arrive. The choice is yours, evolution or extinction. Asterisk, as the Ancient One's presence began to fade from their minds. leaving behind only the impossible structures hanging in space like monuments to incomprehensible power. Sarah realized that humanity's war was far from over. They had simply been promoted to a larger conflict, one that would make their battle with the Vorthans seem like a skirmish between children. The training began immediately, and it was unlike anything humanity had ever experienced. Captain Elena Rodriguez, formerly of the human frigate Vengeance, found herself aboard a structure that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, learning combat techniques from a being that looked like living mathematics. Her instructor was a member of the Kethvar, a species that had passed their trials 3 million years ago and had been fighting the Devourers ever since. Your weapons are crude, but effective. The Kethvar instructor communicated through quantum harmonics that her neural implants translated into something resembling speech. You understand destruction, but you must learn precision. The Devourers cannot be defeated through overwhelming force alone. Elena struggled to comprehend the training scenarios being presented to her. In the simulation chambers, she fought battles across multiple reality layers simultaneously, commanding fleets that existed in parallel dimensions and coordinating attacks through temporal loops that allowed past and future versions of her forces to support each other. The other human trainees were experiencing similar disorientation. Commander Sarah Chun found herself learning to pilot vessels that manipulated the fundamental forces of the universe, while Admiral Webb studied strategic doctrines that treated entire galaxies as single tactical units. The scale is impossible, Sarah confided to Elena during one of their rare breaks. They're showing us conflicts that span millions of years and involve billions of species. How are we supposed to comprehend something like that? The answer came from their Kethvar instructors, who had retained enough individuality to communicate in terms that humans could understand. The Ancient Ones, they learned, had been conducting this cosmic war for so long that they had become something beyond individual consciousness. They existed as a collective intelligence that could process information on galactic scales, but had lost the ability to innovate or adapt quickly to new situations. That was why they needed younger species like humanity. The newly tested races brought fresh perspectives and the kind of desperate creativity that came from recent survival struggles. The Ancient Ones provided the resources and knowledge, while species like the humans provided the tactical innovation and adaptive thinking. Your war with the Vorthans was particularly valuable, explained Isigitar, a Kethvar who had taken a special interest in human development. Most species become either too rigid or too cautious after their trials. You became more flexible, more willing to embrace radical solutions. This is why the Ancient Ones have such high hopes for your performance. The compliment felt hollow to Elena, who was beginning to understand the true scope of what they faced. The Devourers weren't simply another alien species with advanced technology. They were entities from outside reality itself, beings that consumed the fundamental structure of existence and left behind voids where universe had once been. "Show me," she demanded during one training session, and immediately regretted it. The simulation that followed was the most terrifying experience of her life. She found herself commanding a fleet of reality-warping vessels against an enemy that couldn't be properly perceived or understood. The Devourers appeared as absences in space-time, holes in existence that grew larger with every moment. Her weapons, capable of destroying planets, simply vanished when they contacted the enemy, as if they had never existed at all. The battle lasted subjective centuries, with Elena aging and dying and being reborn countless times as the simulation stretched across temporal dimensions. She watched entire civilizations rise and fall in the time it took her to fire a single shot, and still the Devourers advanced inexorably forward. When the simulation ended, she found herself back in the training chamber, her human body intact, but her mind reeling from the experience of cosmic-scale warfare. "Now you understand," S.C.K. Tar communicated with something like sympathy. "This is why the Ancient Ones test species so thoroughly. Lesser beings simply cannot comprehend what they would be fighting. But humanity was adapting as they always did. Within months of beginning their training, human tacticians were developing new strategies that impressed even their ancient instructors. They brought a savage creativity to the problem of fighting entities that existed outside normal reality, proposing solutions that more civilized species would never have considered. "What if we don't fight them directly?" proposed Dr. Vasquez during a strategic planning session that included representatives from 17 different species. "What if we make them not want to come here?" The suggestion caused a ripple of shock through the assembled minds. For millions of years, the strategy against the Devourers had been purely defensive, evacuation protocols, and delaying actions designed to slow their advance while moving civilizations to safer regions of space. "Explain," commanded one of the Ancient Ones, its attention focusing on the human delegation like the weight of a star. "The Devourers consume realities," Vasquez continued, her enhanced intellect working at superhuman speeds to develop the concept in real time. "But they seem to avoid areas that are indigestible. What if we poison the galaxy against them?" The plan that emerged from her suggestion was audacious beyond anything the Galactic Alliance had ever attempted. Instead of fighting the Devourers when they arrived, humanity proposed fundamentally altering the structure of the Milky Way itself, introducing quantum paradoxes and reality inversions that would make the entire galaxy toxic to entities that fed on stable space-time. It would make large portions of the galaxy uninhabitable for normal matter-based life, warned Esikatar. Billions of worlds would become impossible to colonize. Admiral Webb's response carried the cold pragmatism that had been forged in humanity's war with the Vorthans. "Better to have a galaxy we can't fully use than no galaxy at all." The Ancient Ones deliberated for 3 days, their collective consciousness processing implications across multiple probability matrices. When they finally responded, it was with something that might have been admiration. "The proposal has merit. We will begin implementation immediately. Humanity will lead the quantum poisoning project." Asterisk, as the meeting dispersed and the various species began preparing for their roles in humanity's plan, Sarah Chan found herself wondering if they had just saved the galaxy or doomed it. The line between salvation and destruction had always been thin for humanity, and now they were walking that line on a cosmic scale. The Devourers were still decades away, but the real war had already begun, not just against an external enemy, but against the temptation to become the very thing they fought against. 27 years after the Ancient Ones first arrived, the Milky Way had become something that no longer resembled the galaxy humanity had once called home. Captain Sarah Chun, now bearing the title of Quantum Architect, a rank that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, stood in the command center of the Paradox Station, watching as the final phase of the Poison Garden project reached completion. Around her, beings from 43 different species worked in harmony to implement humanity's audacious plan. The galaxy had been transformed into a weapon. Every star system had been carefully modified with quantum inversions and reality paradoxes that made them indigestible to the Devourers. Pulsars had been converted into temporal generators that created loops in causality. Black holes had been weaponized into existence drains that would consume anything that fed on reality itself. Entire nebulae had been restructured into probability storms that made logical existence impossible. "Status report," Sarah requested, her consciousness now capable of processing information from multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. "Quantum poisoning at 97% completion," reported Isikatar, her ancient Kethvar partner, who had become something like a friend over the decades. "The remaining systems are being processed by the automated reality inverters." The cost had been staggering. Billions of worlds that had once supported life were now uninhabitable, their quantum signatures twisted into configurations that would repel the Devourers but also made them toxic to normal matter. Entire sectors of the galaxy had been evacuated, their populations relocated to the specially shielded core worlds that could maintain stable reality within the poisoned environment. Humanity had become the gardeners of destruction, carefully cultivating a galaxy-sized trap that would either save everyone or destroy them all. Incoming transmission from the deep space monitoring stations, announced Lieutenant Commander Phillips. His consciousness now expanded across multiple quantum states to handle the vast information streams required for galactic coordination. Sarah felt the familiar chill of anticipation. The Devourers had been detected at the galactic rim 3 days ago, their reality-consuming presence creating distinctive distortions in space-time that their instruments could track from across the galaxy. "Display the data," Sarah commanded. The holographic projector activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with red indicators marking the Devourers' advance. They were moving faster than anticipated, consuming the outer spiral arms with an efficiency that made the Vorthons look sluggish by comparison. "Estimated time to contact with our defense perimeter?" Sarah asked. 14 hours, 37 minutes, Esikatar replied. "The quantum poison has slowed their advance, but they're adapting to it faster than our models predicted." Sarah nodded grimly. They had always known this was a possibility. The Devourers had been consuming realities for eons. They had likely encountered defensive measures like this before, even if not on such a scale. "Signal all stations," she commanded. "Initiate Protocol Omega." Protocol Omega was humanity's final contingency, developed during the darkest moments of their planning when they realized that even their poisoned galaxy might not be enough. If the Devourers proved capable of adapting to their quantum traps, then the galaxy itself would become a weapon in the most literal sense possible. Every star in the Milky Way had been carefully prepared with reality inversors that could, if activated simultaneously, cause the entire galaxy to implode into a single quantum singularity. It would destroy everything within 100,000 light-years, but it would also create an existence vacuum so profound that the Devourers would be unable to approach for millions of years. "Are we really going to do this?" asked Dr. Vasquez, her consciousness connected to the planning network from her position aboard the research vessel Innovation. "Destroy our own galaxy to save the universe." Admiral Webb's response carried the same cold determination that had defined humanity since their first encounter with alien aggression. "If necessary, yes. Better to deny the enemy our resources than to let them use our galaxy as a stepping stone to destroy everything else." The philosophical implications of the decision weighed heavily on every human mind connected to the network. They had spent 70 years becoming efficient killers, and now they were prepared to become cosmic-scale suicide bombers if it meant stopping the Devourers. But as the enemy force approached their outer defensive perimeter, something unexpected happened. The Devourers stopped. "Sensors are showing they're retreating," reported Phillips, his voice carrying disbelief. "The entire enemy formation is pulling back from our poisoned systems." The quantum distortions created by humanity's modifications were having an effect beyond their wildest expectations. The reality paradoxes weren't just making the galaxy indigestible. They were actively painful to the Devourers, creating feedback loops that damaged their essential nature. "It's working," Sarah breathed. "The poison garden is actually working." Over the following days, they watched as the Devourers circled the galaxy like predators approaching a porcupine, testing various approaches but finding every vector of attack blocked by quantum traps and reality inversions. The galaxy had become a fortress that protected not just itself, but the entire local group of galaxies beyond. The Ancient One's collective voice resonated through every human mind with something that might have been relief. "Asterisk, your species has achieved what 7 million years of conventional warfare could not. The Devourers have been turned away." Asterisk, but Sarah felt no satisfaction in their victory. Looking out at the poison galaxy they had created, she saw the cost of their success. They had saved the universe by making their own home uninhabitable, forcing billions of beings to live in artificial environments while their natural worlds remained toxic to normal existence. "What have we become?" she wondered aloud. Esikatar's response carried the wisdom of 3 million years of cosmic warfare. "You have become what the universe needed you to become." The question now is whether you can find a way to become something more. As the Devourers disappeared into the intergalactic void, seeking easier prey in distant galaxy clusters, humanity began the long process of considering what they would do with their poisoned victory. They had proven that they could make the hard choices necessary for cosmic survival, but they had also proven that they were capable of sacrificing everything, including themselves, for the greater good. The galaxy was safe, the universe was secure, and humanity had cemented their place as the most effective guardians the cosmos had ever produced. But as they looked out at the twisted stars and paradox-locked worlds they had created, they had to wonder if their cure had been worse than the disease. In the end, they had answered the Ancient One's call, not just as warriors, but as the universe's willing martyrs, a species so committed to the survival of existence itself that they would poison their own paradise to protect it. The war was over, but the real challenge was just beginning, learning to live in the weapon they had made of their home.